So what does that tell us? That tells us we're still stuck with the same problem. The finite universe that we observe today had to have come from something else. It has to exist because of some other source. Well, if we've never observed something come from nothing, then that tells us something else. That tells us that that source that we observe has to be infinite. So if we know the universe must be the result of some external infinite source, then this of course begs the question, what? And more importantly, can we use science to answer that question? Well, not science in the same sense that we would use to examine the properties of a molecule. However, the science that does apply here is the science of forensics. In other words, in the same way that a police officer would examine the clues left behind by a criminal at the scene of a crime, we can examine the clues left behind by the source of the universe. So what on earth would we look for to see what was responsible for the formation of the universe and of life? It may seem like a daunting task, but I think if we know which questions to ask and where to look for the answers, we can learn a great deal about the source of the universe. For example, the biggest question we want to ask is the source of the universe just some mindless cosmic force as depicted in Star Wars, or does this source actually possess intelligence? To solve this riddle, we can turn to the other sciences and see how scientists detect intelligence. When an archaeologist uncovers an object, how does he decide if it is just a naturally occurring object or an actual artifact? Whether he realizes it or not, the very first thing that he does is look for recognizable design features. Features that tell him that this object was created for a very specific purpose. Let's look at a couple of other sciences and see how scientists tell us they detect intelligence.
Dolphins are social animals. They travel in groups. So can they plan together?
I've seen dolphins in the wild, and all of a sudden, all the dolphins get together and do a deep dive together. Obviously, somebody's coordinated that behavior.
How do they do that? Are they actually communicating? It would help if we could just ask them.
What are you saying?
Now, they make different sounds.
Yeah, French is yes, he's very vocal.
Show me the difference between a click and a whistle.
Here's his whistle. And these are his clicks.
Scientists think these clicks and whistles could be the building blocks of a language. But no one has yet figured out how to translate them.
Yeah, you have a lot to talk about, don't you, mister?
Stan and Terry have devised an amazing two-step experiment. It's designed to test whether dolphins are just trained performers, or can they plan and come up with tricks of their own?
Ronnie and Bill forward, Richie and Paya from shallow to way back.
First, the dolphins are asked to learn a concept, to create a trick of their own, not just a rote behavior. Now, Stan and Terry are upping the ante. They want to see if their two-star dolphins, Ronnie and Bill, can create something together. This means the dolphins are going to have to think, plan, and hopefully communicate.
So you're building them up now to the big moment.
Okay, we're going to do create this time. Ready? Fingers up. Together. Create.
Underwater, Stan gets the dolphins' view of things. His camera is also recording any sounds the dolphins make. Sure enough, he hears their signature whistle.
Go, go, go! Did you see that? They went on their backs and they lifted their tails.
That's really cool.
That's monumental. They've never done that before.
It appears that these dolphins can do a lot more than just rote learning.
What we're doing in SETI, both in the radio here, which is what I work on, and also in the optical part of the spectrum, we're looking for techno signatures. We're looking for something that is engineered. We're looking for things that show up at a very small range of frequencies. Nature produces signals that cover a lot of the spectrum. So here in the radio, we're looking for frequency compression. In the optical, when we look for signals, we look for time compression. We look for bright flashes that last a billionth of a second or less. That might be somebody's laser.
So here we have three completely different sciences trying to detect intelligence. There's archaeology looking for design features in objects, marine biology looking for levels of intelligence in dolphins, and SETI Institute looking for intelligent life in the night sky. Notice how all of them have one thing in common. They're all looking for characteristics we call specificity. Specificity, simply defined, is anything that an observer can see was formed with an intended particular purpose. So scientists can use specificity to detect intelligence in those areas. Why wouldn't we be able to use specificity to try and see if the universe was formed by an intelligent source?
And that's what we're trying to detect here, is intelligence. So the observer has to have that aha moment, you know, that moment where he recognizes that this object that he's looking at has an intended purpose. Just because we don't recognize specificity doesn't mean that specificity does not exist. It simply means we didn't recognize it. So that becomes the key point. I want to stress that, the key point to detecting intelligence. And that's what defines things of a specified nature from things of a complex nature. You can see complex things created naturally all the time in nature, but that doesn't mean that they were created by an intelligent source. It just means that the laws of physics cause them to come out with a complex pattern, or cause them to come out looking complex. The key to specificity is to have that aha moment where you actually, something clicks and you know that object had a purpose. That object was created for a specific goal.
So because we've only observed things with a specific intent or purpose formed by intelligence and never by natural processes, specificity literally becomes our intelligence detector. You could say that whenever we observe something of a specified nature, we can be sure that it was the product of an intelligent source. What seems to make some people nervous is when specificity is observed somewhere that conflicts with their worldview, somewhere that they definitely would not expect to find it. Someone very wise once said, "It's impossible for one to know the truth unless one loves the truth." In other words, you have to want the truth so bad that you're willing to change your personal beliefs if you find that they conflict with what you find to be true. As an example, consider the following case of Fred Hoyle, famous physicist and dedicated atheist, and his encounter with specificity where he didn't expect it.
One of the great triumphs of astrophysics in the second half of the 20th century was to figure out how the elements are made. Because the very early universe is very simple, it only makes very simple elements. In fact, hydrogen and helium, the two simplest elements, and you can't really do very much with them. They have very boring chemistry. You need much more elements if you're going to have something as interesting as life, and in particular you need carbon. The chemistry of life is the chemistry of carbon. So where does carbon come from? There's only one place in the whole universe where carbon is made. It's made in the interior nuclear furnaces of the stars. Every atom of carbon in our bodies was once inside a star. We're people of stardust. Now, how that happened was figured out in Cambridge. Fred Hoyle, a senior colleague of mine, was one of the leading figures in this. And they were trying to figure out how carbon was made. They had helium, and if they could make 3 heliums stick together, that would make carbon. But they couldn't figure out how to do that. To get 3 small things like that to stick together at once, you can't do it. Okay, so we do it bit by bit, make 2 stick together, that makes beryllium, stays around a bit, another one comes along, makes carbon. But it doesn't work because beryllium is very, very unstable. It just disappears like that. So they were stuck. And then Fred had a good idea, and he said, it'll just go if there is something called a resonance, a very enhanced effect, which is just at the right energy. in carbon to make that extra one stick on much, much more quickly than you would have thought. So you're very pleased with myself. We went off the nuclear data tables just to check that this resonance, this effect, was there, and it wasn't. And so Fred was a very stubborn, persistent friend. He rang up some friends and said, look, you've missed something in carbon. There's a resonance there that you haven't spotted, but I know exactly where it is, so you had to have this energy. And they were probably a bit reluctant to look, but in the end they went and looked, and they found it. That's a wonderful scientific story. But also it struck Fred that it's more than a scientific story, because, of course, if the laws of nuclear physics had been a tiny bit different, either there would be no resonance at all, or it would be some other energy which would be no good. And Fred, who had a lifelong commitment to atheism, is reported to have said in the Yorkshire accident, beyond my personal imitate, the universe is a put-up job. In other words, this can't be just a happy accident. This is too significant for that. There must be something behind all this. Because Fred didn't like the word God, he says some capital I intelligence has monkeyed with the laws of the universe.